Greetings and salutations, greetings and salutations, greetings and salutations. Welcome to Fabian Say. Looking a little different. You notice that the we don't have the fancy intro and the music and all that stuff because my co-conspirator Damien Levy having laptop issues. So in fact, this episode should have been the episode I'd recorded about Easter and Lent and giving up things for Easter. But Damien lapdog, I decided to say nah cooperate and nah fix till next week. Till Wednesday. But I want to also get this episode out. And this episode is about my father. So my father died on Monday, the 22nd of March, as a result of COVID complications. And even thinking about that, just based on people's life experience and spiritual beliefs, so, oh, you lost your father, they always makes me giggle because no, I didn't lose him. We know exactly where he is. Actually, the term I use a lot, which some people struggle with, is made his transition. And people say, made his transition to what? Well, to the next plane of existence. So he's no longer existing on the earthly human plane. His soul has ascended, and ascended doesn't mean going to heaven. His soul has left his body. And so my formidable father, Winston Thomas, was admitted to UE with complications for two other illnesses. So he was diabetic, and because he was a bullbucker and dopey conqueror, he was diagnosed 2 years ago, and my father refused to take insulin or any other medication. Against the advice of his doctor and his family pleading, he was like, no, no, no. So like, Daddy, look. My mom cooks really healthy. I tell you, the healthiest food I eat is when I go eat by my parents. But he said, Dad, that's not going to be enough. So anyway, his blood sugar was through the roof. And then he had a prostate scare a few years ago, and he was having a bleeding issue. And so all those stuff actually normalized. But then he tested positive for COVID, labored breathing. So what the cause of death is COVID pneumonia. And folks, let me tell you, it was rough. Here's a couple of things that conspired to the roughness. Because of what I do as a trainer facilitator, and I had a contract with Southeast Regional Health Authority for a couple of years doing training for them, you get an inkling of what's going on in our healthcare. An inkling of some of the really ridiculous circumstances, shortages, just things not being in place, just bad. Well, COVID has come and popped down, mash up, and fracture the whole situation. So it was rough. So, we get there. I have to, thank you because we for all our difficulties, I'm going to say we got pretty good service from UE. They got us out of the waiting area quickly because of the COVID. We waited 3 or 4 hours to get a room, which was really rough. My father was in a lot of pain. But a doctor saw him 3 times. Came and saw him, did another COVID test, did the blood sugar, gave him antibiotics. Just the wait for the room was really, really long. And Daddy was in a lot of pain. He was complaining. It's what you go through a lot of stuff. So I sat there, in the tent with him, and I was thinking, okay, so Holy Spirit, ancestors, news is, me know say me is a writer, and I know at some point I'm gonna write about this, but we not dash a whole heap of information for me one time. Take time now, take time. I want to bombard me with so much things at once. I remember having that thought. And you are struck by the fact that, and this isn't necessarily new, because my father, as your parents get old, they get smaller, and they get smaller and diminish physically and mentally, but they also get smaller in your consciousness, in your awareness of them as beings. When you're kids, sometimes your parents are giants, and part of our life journey is they get smaller and smaller. And so Daddy was in a lot of pain. He was complaining about the chair, and he wanted me to check in. I kept saying, Daddy, we just have to wait. At one part, my father grabbed him phone at 9:45 to call his doctor, his person, to ask the man if he can come down to you to get him a more comfortable chair. And I'm like, Dr. Scott, we apologize for you getting this call from my demanding high maintenance father. And I sat there, and in the moments of pain and discomfort, I was really relieved when he nodded off. But we had 3 or 4 lucid conversations. A couple of them were things that we've talked about before, and I'm sharing some of that stuff later. And yeah, this is gonna be, I also thought that I'm really glad I had an idea to write a book about my parents' England experience. So they met in England, and then they had me, and they came back to Jamaica when I was 7. And I want to write about that, not just that experience, but how I was raised as this fierce, proud Jamaican black boy who my father wanted me to know that we're not from England, they don't want us here, and we don't want to be here, and we'll go back our yard, which they did. So I did interviews with him and my mom on Skype, and they were hysterical. It was just so funny. It's not so good. No, man, what you talking about? And I said, hello, pay attention to the interviewer. But I'm glad because I didn't know he was going to leave us so quickly. So I now have that information. And then this my third book, so I have one self-published book. I have a manuscript of spoken word with publishers now. And then this third book, Jump the Line. And the working title is Chapter and Verse, and it's memories and moments from my life. So they jumped the line because I would have been working on that book with my parents. But I'm really glad I did those interviews because Daddy has a better recall than Mommy. And so I did them notes. So thank Spirit and ancestors for that because he'd be gone. And of course, this now means that there's going to be at least one additional chapter in the book because, you know, my father dying is a major milestone moment or memory. Things that hit you, you know, so first of all, there's the grim aftermath of the nitty-gritty of the things you need to do. You know, funeral home, death certificate, all that stuff. So that stuff has come together pretty quickly. But it's just like, you're like, okay, so emotionally dealing with that and you're pressing through and pushing on. Yeah, it's been rough, but not so rough. I shared in a post online that my families, the Thomas practicality and fortitude, you know, rose. We've moved into action mode. We supported each other emotionally. My mom is a superstar. She is just shining and dealing with her pain and her grief, but being very practical and saying, boy, you know, we have to press on. One of my favorite things is, so we were doing conference calls for the doctor's updates when we got them, and those took a while for us to get those from you, and that was distressing. I'll touch on that a little later. And when the doctor called me back after the update on Monday afternoon, the 22nd, she called me back like in 15 or 20 minutes to say, and you know, check with me, are you alone? Are you sitting? She have not so good news. And she told me what had happened and that they pronounced my father dead. And so I called my sisters and I said, okay, so me not think say if you tell a lady say her husband dead is a conference call. Let me mask up, sanitize up, go to the house, because of course my mom is down in quarantine because she live with my father. And so we went, called my sisters, told her. My mom kind of went, oh, so I'm gone. She leaned back in the sofa. We sat there for a while, and she said, all right, well, he's no longer suffering. So we went through the who calling who tonight, who being called tomorrow. So my sisters got calling some of the family in England. My mom and I making some calls here. So I said to her, well, I can stay. And I didn't come prepared to stay, but I can stay. She said, no, man, all right. So, okay. So I head back home. So, of course, you know, in that night now, lots of family and friends are calling. And apparently several of them say, so, you stay in the house? You stay in the house by yourself? My mom's response was, so where we must go? Where we must sleep? I'm not afraid of my husband. The man we married for how many years? I'm not afraid of 15 of spirit. And I thought, yes, mother dearest, superstar. She's like, when we must sleep, I'm not afraid of my husband. The next morning we called her to check in. She said, I feeding the dogs, you know. I feel your father's spirit with me. He's no longer suffering. We just need to do what we need to do to get through this and support each other. And that's been, you know, where she is, you know. So this woman married to this man for 50 plus years. So that's the whole other thing we have to now look at and deal with now, you know. She clearly can't live by herself. So as a family, we have to figure that out, what this life change for all of us looks like. In processing and thinking and going through my own, and I find I'm writing a lot because, you know, the writer in me. One of the things that hit me that I'm really grateful for is I'm the firstborn. I was the last one to see my father alive because my mom was in the waiting area. I was on the inside in the tent with him. And literally when they took him to the isolation unit that night, I'm the last one. I spent that last 3-4 hours with him, and is a blessing and a gift, but it also has weight. It's heavy. In the covidity of it all, and I'm gonna bless up Emma Lewis. Emma says I must claim and copyright this term because she's never heard anybody else using covidity. Of course, my father died alone. We couldn't get to see him. We couldn't visit him. Of course, there's no contact. So that was hard. So when my father's high maintenance, he was calling us and complaining about every little thing. And then when he started to worsen, he was calling my sisters a lot, and something wasn't coherent, and that was difficult because there's nothing you can do. And so we wish he had not died alone. We wish we'd been able to be there to gather around him. My sisters are in England, so it would have been me. But the covidity just did not allow that. In addition to this, the COVID it's rough because it's separating us. You're telling your yard and all this stuff, and and we have to acknowledge that staying at home is not safe for everybody. But it's one of my friends. She was trying to get somebody to play a voice note for her colleague's 1-year-old child who has COVID because that's the only way he'll get to hear his mother's voice. It's rough. I want to, in Jamaica, the healthcare, when on a critical ward, there's one nurse to 10 patients. It's insane. Patients mess up themselves and have to sit in it for 2 hours because the nurse just cannot get to you. In my father's case, they wanted to move him to ICU, I'm going to say at least 2 or 3 days before he died. There was no space in ICU. Dennis there, the COVID drug, there's none of it at the UE pharmacy. Would my father possibly live longer? We don't know. These are some of the things. So I want to, and when Dr. Fletcher, gave me the information about my father dying, I said to her, I also just want to pause and thank you. I want to thank you for your grace, for your charm, for your work, for wading through this difficulty. Me and my family want to thank you. I said, please pass it on to the Ward 8 nurses for me because we may not get to do that. Because let me tell you, as difficult as it is, as annoying and dehumanizing as it is, our healthcare workers are pushing through this and dealing with this every day. Hundreds of admissions a day. In one hospital I know in Maypen, they had to convert what was a nurses and doctors lounge into an area for patients. They're being inundated with people. The system did pop down before, and COVID come and just goes a whoop crazy. So I worry for our nation, above and beyond COVID, because if your healthcare don't work, with education system not that good, crime and violence and corruption are out of control. Whoa, my people, we have whole heap of work to do. And what does that work look like? How do we show up? What can we do? So amidst all that, just there's a lot going on, but we're pushing through. I have to share, so I called Sam Isaac's funeral home, and the lady goes, "Whoa, hello." And I was putting on my headphones, so she said, when she said hello the first time, I didn't answer. Then she said, "Hello." And I said, "Hello, how are you doing?" And she said, "I'm tired, busy, and I want to go home." I was like, oh. So I said, "Okay, then I release you of the obligation of taking my call. Go on home, yeah." And I hung up. Annoyed, posted on social media, and quite a few people said, including our close colleague of mine, Carmen Clark, said, "Boy, that's not the Sam Isaac's way at all. At all. I'm going to give the managing director your number. He's going to call you." And several other people came to the defense. And I thought, it's a good thing when your business, people know you and know your business and your brand. And he called me, Gordon Chuck, he called me that same night. He said, "I hope this is not too late." And he called me and he apologized. And then he said, "If it's not too late, I know it's a rough time for you. Can you tell me what information you needed from us?" So I told him. He gave me the information and the quote over the phone. Then he said, "I'll call you back in the morning." And he has called and stayed with us ever since. My father's body is now at Sam Isaac's. And funny about the circle of life. So my brethren and colleague Ian McKnight called me to say, "Fabian, Gordon was a little boy running up and down at Jamaica Aid Support. He wasn't Jamaica's Aid Support for life yet." Because Sam Isaac's was the only funeral home that would take bodies of people living with HIV that had died from AIDS complications. And I used to work at Jazz when we had Osborne Road, and we had the only AIDS hospice in Jamaica. So Ian said, "God, you probably remember him, but he used to come there with his family or his father and be running up and down the place." And I said that to Mr. Chuck, and I said, "Wow, look at life, look at the circle of life." I have to big up Gordon Chuck. He is a gentleman. He's taken care of things. He's sorted out. When he went to UE to get the body, because they told us, yes, you can come for the body now. UE sent my father body Ghana Jones funeral home. Didn't tell us. So Mr. Chuck said, it's no problem. We'll get him first thing in the morning. As soon as we get the body, we'll call you. And he did that. So I want to big up Gordon Chuck. And anybody who has to deal with the difficulty of a death and handling those details, I highly recommend Sam Isaacson Son Funeral Home. We also talked about the lady who did the road to me. And I said to him as a I said, but you have to understand that she represent you. You were also juggling and thinking, did she think she was talking to a colleague? So maybe we'll find that out. But I also said, we'll come to some training, but not just customer service training, which is one of my favorite areas to train in, but also emotional intelligence and how do you balance dealing with customers or the public when you are under pressure, when you're hurting, when your heart are hurting, and when you're having a pandemic. How do you rise above all that? So my father has died. A colleague of mine said you've joined the club of parents who have, people who have either lost a parent or both parents. I'm grateful. I'm grateful that my particular path and my journey has led me to know and believe and acknowledge that my father has left this plane of life. That what we have are the memories of his life, the good, the bad, the indifferent. My father was many things, and as some of you would know, I'm really blessed and happy that we mended our relationship before he died. Because in my earlier days, I were not to be featuring the man, none die.